A public-private partnership is a collaboration between government and private sector companies. Now, it is meant to accelerate the pace of service delivery in certain instances so that is delivered to communities. However, these partnerships come with challenges that pose a threat to their intended goal. To talk to us more about accountability, transparency, and the ethical question around these partnerships, we're joined now by Executive Director at Corruption Watch, Karam Singh, who talks to us from Cape Town this morning. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for your time. If we just use the example of the G4S multinational security company working alongside the government of South Africa in order to manage some of their prisons, what should we read into these partnerships as ordinary members of society? Are they to the benefit of the country or not?
Thanks so much, Collie. It's a complicated question that you're asking, and I think it's difficult to just give an answer in broad strokes to say that such arrangements are either beneficial or not beneficial. But looking specifically at your example and the challenges around private prisons, I think this would raise a serious concern for us. I think even prior to the whole Thabo Bester debacle, one of the biggest deprivations of rights that one can have is to be incarcerated by the state, either as an awaiting trial prisoner or as a result of a successful prosecution. Ensuring that those rights are safeguarded ultimately is the responsibility of the state as the guardians of the Constitution and guardians of various pieces of legislation. So when the state then goes into a partnership with a private company, the company, then steps almost into the shoes of the state, and the obligations upon them in terms of assuring, the protection of rights, it becomes the responsibility of the company. So I think when it comes to private security prisons, and particularly these high security prisons where there are serious limitations upon the rights of those convicted, this raises serious concerns, and the issues around the protection of rights is something that needs to be taken very seriously by both parties.
Yeah. I suppose one of the questions or one of the reasons why this is going to become a very, very important area to look at is that on the one hand, we know that in terms of just capacity to do the work, government is unable to do that on its own. And that's why you will hear more often than not the president encouraging this public-private partnership. But if a private company, private sector company, is then going to treat the government, whose monies, by the way, are taxpayers' monies, is going to treat it with disrespect. I mean, you only have to look at what happened in Parliament this week. This company was invited to go and account. How did Thabo Bester escape? Instead, what concerns them are the legalities that bind it to the company that it is contracted to. And then you wonder to yourself, why is our money actually being used badly?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the position of the private prison company in this case is really, really problematic, to focus on their sort of contractual rights and contractual obligations. I think you make a really important point about the issues around capacity within the state. We have a constitution which really creates a very high bar in terms of what it means to be a developmental state. We have a Bill of Rights which is just justiciable and which requires the progressive realization of socioeconomic rights, whether that be in housing, healthcare, water and sanitation, education. When the state seizes its responsibility or seeks partnerships, as I said, then those obligations then flow into the public-private partnership. And we accept that government does have capacity challenges, and that the private sector, particularly in the fight against corruption, could have a very important role to play, whether that be in executing forensic investigations on behalf of the state. Even, we've spoken about the challenges around prosecutions and prosecuting these complex commercial crime cases, and the possibility that private sector expertise at the bar, with attorneys and advocates, could assist in pursuing these cases. But again, it has to be done in a very careful way, and in a way which guards the independence, and where there is accountability, particularly where there are significant funds, flowing from the state into these private coffers. We saw the role that various private actors played in executing the mandate of the Zondo Commission.
Yeah.
And that cost a lot of money. But I think, the Zondo Commission executed its mandate appropriately, without fear, favor, or prejudice, and guarding these issues around independence and accountability. And
I'm glad you raised state capture, because that's the area I was going to go to. We now have the benefit of that commission, whether you talk the companies that are in the auditing space, KPMG comes to mind, or consultancy firms, whether you talk McKinsey or the other one, I think Bain and Company. These companies have done more damage than good. And so the question becomes, why is it then so difficult for our government to cut ties with them? Or could the cynical view be that the reason they are kept on, up until, of course, the public does discover through the work of people like us, the media, is it because they, at certain instances, grease the hands of dirty and filthy politicians, including the corrupt civil servants?
Yes, yeah. I mean, certainly in the case of Bain, they had a case to answer to, and they've now been subjected to a blacklisting. In the case of McKinsey, we know that McKinsey have been indicted and have been named as a criminally accused in one of the state capture cases. This goes back now to the question of accountability. And many of the large auditing firms and accounting firms have been implicated in state capture. And I think for those companies that have been implicated, there has to be some kind of a cooling off period. We see this internationally. We even seen this recently with Ernst & Young in an international case with findings against them. And what happens is there has to be a cooling off period where such companies are debarred, are put on a blacklist, not necessarily for perpetuity. There's a possibility that these companies can be revived and can come back. But I think as a society, these are things that we need to look at. We need to look at what is the capacity of the state to execute its mandate? To what extent can it utilize skills within the private sector, but do that in a way which guards these issues around integrity, around independence, and where there's accountability? And when there's wrongdoing, or when these private firms facilitate wrongdoing on behalf of government, as we saw in Transnet and Eskom, then there has to be implications for them. And we have to say as a society that it's not acceptable that they continue to then receive government contracts and work on behalf of government when they still have cases to answer.
As a final question to you, and I know that we are often blamed in the media for focusing too much attention on public corruption. That means corruption in government, forgetting that there is a so-called corrupter and a corruptee. The credibility of the private sector, when they're going to stand up and say, no, we hate corruption, a government must do something about it. How credible are they at this moment when the focus, the spotlight, is on companies such as G4S? Can they speak with any level of credibility?
The private sector is a very broad grouping, from small, medium-scale enterprises to international conglomerates. So I don't think we can just paint the private sector with one brush and say that they're not reliable. We can't take them at their word. I think we've identified, that there has to be consequences for bad corporate actors and those who haven't come forth and haven't given full disclosures, I think have lost a credibility and some trust from the general public. But I think, we can't just paint the private sector with one brush. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy speaks about the need for a total society approach. So we all have a role to play from civics to church groups to organizations like ours in civil society and the private sector. So we have to call them out. They have to walk the walk. And I think going forward, collaboration, partnerships, strategic partnerships with the private sector is going to have to be part of our basket of solutions to help us turn a corner and move into a better place when it comes to a kind of all society approach to the fight against corruption.
Karam Singh, let me thank you very much for your time.